Okay, welcome to the second masterclass today. The first one was on the NGO pushback, and which was very shocking, very informative, very interesting, and very shocking. And we see a lot of work ahead of us that the environmental laureates could take the lead in. And now we're going to talk about the work of NGOs in terms of campaigning and outreach and advocacy from an organization in the Netherlands called Agenda, which has very, very practical experience in this area. And I'm happy that we have to lead this workshop today Dennis van Berkel. He'll tell you more about himself. He's the legal counsel for the NGO Agenda in the Netherlands, and they've been in the media of late because they brought a case to the Supreme Court of the Netherlands on climate change, that the government was not living up to its responsibilities in protecting the citizens from the impacts of climate change. But I'm not going to say anything more because that's Dennis's job. And he's going to talk about sort of out-of-the-box, unusual ways of outreach and campaigning. And so we're looking forward to a very interesting session. Dennis, I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks. Do I take that one or this one? Okay. I don't know. Does this one work?
You have, please wait till the mic comes because this is all being recorded.
Does it work? Does this one work? I have no idea. Yeah? All right, great. Right. So here is so what this presentation is about is how we as Agenda, we're a really small and a new NGO in the Netherlands, and this presentation will be about how we perceive to achieve change in the Netherlands in the climate and energy field, which is not necessarily the same as how do you run a campaign. But it entails a lot more. And let me start. I'm really humbled by standing in front of this group because I'm really new. I'm not only I'm really relatively new to this whole field. I started out as being a corporate lawyer, and I got quite concerned with climate change only around 2009. So that was after the whole Copenhagen debacle, and I thought, wow, I thought these people were going to take care of this climate issue, so what's happening? And I got more and more involved and more concerned, so I quit my job at a certain point and really focused all my energy, all the energy I had on climate change, the law, the economics, and the science of climate change. And I got involved when I did that in New York for a year, and I got back to the Netherlands. And I met the legal team that was working on this case that Virginia talked about, that sort of gave us a claim to fame around the globe in the climate area. And so that was a sort of radical shift for me. But so what's the? But that's also it sort of links with what the Agenda Foundation does. So the goal of the Agenda Foundation, so it was only founded in 2007, is to make the Netherlands sustainable as fast as possible. And Agenda is a sort of these two words together, urgent agenda. That's what we're doing. And we're doing that by sort of by in a couple of ways. And one is sort of to connect the underflow with the upper stream. So that is to see what is already happening, to make this bottom up what is already there with the entrepreneurs that are already there, that are already creating the new economy, to make them bigger and to show that this is actually possible, and via this also actually change policies, etc. So it's about urgency and solutions. And the agenda comes from the University of Rotterdam, the Institute on Transition Studies. And this is graph on transition studies. You have the old way, the fossil fuel way, and then you have the new way, that's the renewable energy way. And we believe we're actually already here at the turning point. A lot of things are already happening. And one of the sort of fundamental economics behind that was mentioned in the previous during the previous presentation here, is that renewable energy is actually already more cheaper than nuclear and coal and gas in a lot of places. But this is not going fast enough, as we know. We have about 20, 30 years to sort of completely redo the economy from a fossil fuel to a sustainable society. Usually I now go into the bit where I tell about all the horrors of climate change, but I cut that bit out because I'm sure you're familiar with that. So what did we start doing? We start organizing in the Netherlands way in the beginning, the Day of Sustainability. And the whole, the point about the Day of Sustainability was to show what people were already doing in the sustainable economy. Entrepreneurs, citizens, citizen groups, etc., etc. We introduced the first electric cars to the Netherlands. We just bought them. We went to the City Hall of Amsterdam and said, well, you know, you think sustainability is important. If you drive within your city borders, this car actually does a fine job. And by doing that, we sort of were at the start of creating an electric charging infrastructure in Amsterdam. And Amsterdam right now has the most dense electric charging infrastructure in the world, I believe. Another thing we did is that the Netherlands, although when I tell about people that we sued the government, they say, well, isn't the Netherlands really progressive? Well, in Europe, they're one of the worst when it comes to climate change. Only Malta and Luxembourg have less renewable energy than the Netherlands does. So there was really no policy to speak of. What we did is there were no subsidies, but people were. So there were people saying, well, you know, if you buy on bulk, it probably gets cheaper. So we went to China and we talked to a solar panel producer. So, well, if we buy in bulk, if we buy 50,000 solar panels, how much does the price come down? And the price would come down by a third. So we went back to the Netherlands and we got all these citizens sort of to sign up and give us money without having the solar panels. But we just opened a bank account. And all these people said, yeah, we want sun. That's what it says. That was the campaign. We want sun. We want those solar panels. The government's not doing it. We're going to do it ourselves. So it was really empowerment of citizens that was sort of, and pride that was behind that. We went back to China and said, well, if you give us some money in advance, we can even lower the price a bit more. So we did all that. So, and that was a hugely successful campaign. And it was sort of the start of the rollout of a lot of energy cooperatives in the Netherlands, and that are now using this model to get more solar panels in the Netherlands. So it's all about new business models. It's all about putting the light on small entrepreneurs. I just met one of them over there that is working on a shared car system. And so we have different programs in different areas, and we also work with especially these types of people to show it's actually possible. And it's not as difficult. So imagining the impossible and saying that the impossible is actually not that impossible, that's one of the key things that's behind our work. But after a couple of years, so we were all doing this, you know, really nice and positive and energetic campaigns. And then around the time that I actually quit my job, and Urgenda as a foundation also changed its strategy because things are clearly not going fast enough. So we're focusing more and more on energy and climate, and we changed our actions. And I give a lot of these presentations, and my director, Marianne Minnesma, does the same thing. And we have sort of as a standard 1/3 urgency and 2/3 solutions. That's sort of how we talk, and that's what we do in everything that we do. We talk about the urgency, and then we talk about the solutions. If you talk too much about the urgency, you know, everybody is depressed and nothing happens. If you talk only about the solutions, then, you know, it's jolly good and things will work out themselves anyway, right? So this is sort of the combination that we're using, and why that's important is that we're giving these presentations also a lot of to CEOs and to people at companies, etc., etc. And by doing that, we are sort of creating change agents throughout sort of the Netherlands, very secretively. But it's working, and it's sort of, you know, this movement in the Netherlands is building, is growing. So what we after sort of, you know, changing our in 2012, what Urgenda started to do was to work on this report that said, well, everybody says it's impossible. We can't, this new economy, it's too difficult. We drafted a report and said, no, it can be done. In 20 years, we can get the whole of the Netherlands on 100% sustainable energy in 20 years. And what this report sort of showed is that it's technically possible, it's financially possible, the people are there, we don't actually need to train this whole new workforce that's non-existent. The people are actually already there. And it's easy, no, but it's not impossible. The whole thing is, it's possible if you want it. And that's the whole thing about this transition. It's not about technical impossibility or whatever. It's just a matter of will often. So, and what do you get after you completely made the whole economy 100% neutral in 20 years? You create 150,000 jobs, a lot of innovation. We're not dependent on Russia anymore, which is, for a number of reasons, for us, in that sense, a good thing. And actually, your whole, this is also quite important. It's not more expensive. It's cheaper. It's cheaper than than staying on fossil fuels. It's actually $3 billion euros cheaper than a business as usual scenario after 20 years. And so what does this report sort of consists of? And I'll give you, so what we do, we didn't only draft the report, we actually want to show that it's possible. And if we see that, in sort of, there are not players out there that are doing the things that we think are necessary, we try to pick them up ourselves. So in the built environment in the Netherlands is about 1/3 of CO2 emissions. So the whole built environment we line out in this report needs to become energy neutral. Now, these are all pictures of what people often, and in Freiburg is actually a place where you see lots of these beautiful, energy neutral buildings. But these are new buildings, and in the Netherlands, about 35,000 of them are built every year, but we have 3 million existing buildings. So the real challenge is in the existing buildings. So what we started doing is first, and this is a good example of how we perceived that you create change. We got a couple of experts around the table to say, how can we make these existing buildings energy neutral? So that means they create as much energy, heat and electricity, etc., as they use, and for an amount that you can pay off in 15 years. Because if you can pay it back in 15 years, it becomes interesting for an investor. Pension funds could come in. And we actually got it all on paper. It worked out. So we had on paper. We went to the pension funds, and we said, "Look, this is something you should start to invest in." And they said, "Yeah, but we don't know. It doesn't exist yet." So no, of course not, because you need to invest in it. So what we did is that, well, all right, we'll do it ourselves. So we found all the people. Texel is one of the islands in the north of the Netherlands. They had a goal of becoming 100% energy neutral in 2020, and so they have a very active civil sort of society there. And we got, we found these people that were willing to trust us that we would be able to make their house 100% energy neutral, and we did it. We did it for an amount of 35,000 euros, which is about what you pay in the Netherlands for your energy bill in 15 years. And now we are scaling up. We actually we started actually a company with another grant to scale up this work. And what's the interesting thing? Before this was done, politics had nothing to say about energy neutral houses. Like, whoop, what's that? We started to make the things and say, look, it's possible. There's an actual guy, you can call him. He's there. And now in the Netherlands, energy neutral houses are really sort of starting to become a mainstream thing. A very important thing for us to be able to roll this out is the financing, because you have the mortgages and there are all sorts of limits on that. So we thought, well, if you change the financing structure where the finance is not on the person, but it's on the house, and if the person moves, he doesn't have this loan hanging on his neck, and that's all scary, having debts and all that kind of stuff. Attach it to the house, and it's not there yet. The law is not changed yet, but I'm convinced it's going to happen in the next year. And why I think this is important is that we first had to show the house that it can be done, and then the policy changes. Whereas I think, often in sort of climate and energy environment, we draft the reports and this is how it should be done. If we change the policies, things will happen. And we try to do it the other way around, which is really difficult because if the circumstances are not there, it's uneconomic, people say in the beginning. So you use all this energy, you use a lot of trust, you use people that feel that this needs to happen, you get all that energy together and you just show that it's sort of possible. That's sort of, in short, our theory of change, you could call it. So mobility is another chapter in that report. This is and this is one of the things, and that's sort of what we also try to show people. Things are really moving fast in electric mobility. This is the graph of the take-up of electric vehicles in the Netherlands as of December of last year. So it's going up fast. Another thing is these are the charging points, and a very important bit of also how fast innovations can go, and much faster than anyone expects. This is a number of 44. This is actually the most important bit. This is fast chargers. A fast charger can charge your car in about an hour, which of course is very important if you want to completely have the whole transport system to be electric. 5 years ago, one of these systems cost 100,000 euros. So 5 years ago, everybody said, it's impossible, you can't do this. Now we have a complete grid in the Netherlands. Anywhere in the Netherlands, you are close enough to a fast charging station of this company called Fastnet. They just rolled out this whole network throughout the Netherlands. So there you see how, and this is a very recent thing, so you see how fast these things can go. This is the car that we imported into the Netherlands. It is a Norwegian car, and this is what now are the taxis from Schiphol to Amsterdam. The taxi service from Schiphol to Amsterdam is run by Teslas, and that's a really different. Look at the difference. So what's next in 5 years? I don't know. We're all going to fly. No, and you have the self-driving car. And that's going to be this self-driving car. When I talk to people who know a lot about what's happening in transport, they say, yeah, I'm going to, probably my next car is going to be my last. What do you mean my next car is going to be my last? Well, with these fast-driving cars, you don't need a car. You just, on your iPhone, you say, well, I need a car in 10 minutes. And it's going to drive to you. And, there's a system that's going to sort of calculate what's the closest car, et cetera, et cetera. It's much cheaper. The economics, it plays out. You can have the best car you want for the lowest. So, and this is, and these are people that really have been right for a long time, whereas other people said, no, it can be done. But it can be done. So food, industry, of course. And if I'm not going to go into all these things because I could talk for 2 days. And that sort of lowers your energy demand by 50%. That's what the report sort of lines out. And the rest you do with wind and sun, etc. So that's one bit. But just the report and showing how it can be done is not enough. We see that in the Netherlands, it doesn't create enough pressure on the system. So we're looking for other pressure points. Now I think most of the people are probably here aware of the divestment campaign. The campaign, the idea behind the campaign that there's 5 times as much fossil fuel currently on the balance sheets of fossil fuel companies than we can burn to stay under 2 degrees, which is sort of a scary thought. Agenda in the Netherlands. This campaign. What's behind this campaign really was 3 guys, or a team of 2 or 3 guys, in the UK going over, doing this research on these balance sheets, and they published a report. I was told it was a hard copy, 100 issues, and someone read this report, Bill McKibben, and he wrote an article on that report in the Rolling Stone. And it was picked up by him and by us in the Netherlands. So that was 2013. The article's 2012. Before that, nobody had heard of the carbon bubble. Nobody. That's not long ago. Yeah. And when we started, in the US, it was a college. It was a college campaign. So college students telling their universities, listen, you have funds in fossil fuel companies that are destroying our future. That's immoral. How can you do that? We're here to, to invest in our future. How can you do this? We did the same in the Netherlands. And what's happened, and this is a very recent report by the Carbon Tracker. That's sort of the, the three guys, extremely smart, that went all through all the numbers. And they say, if we want to stay under 2 degrees, you have to sort of think, there's 2.2 trillion of planned investments that are worth nothing. I mean, if anything can create a complete an economic shock and chaos in the global economy, it's 2.2 trillion of investments being worth nothing. That's scary. But what's happening? So this started in 2013, and what's happening already in 2014? Goldman Sachs saying, zombie investments, Citigroup, get out of fossil fuel. What happened? Standard & Poor's sort of, pushing on Shell, saying that Shell should, rethink its investments. The Bank of America dumping coal. So this is, that's only 2-3 years after that this thing started. So by thinking outside of the box, a very small group of people had an immense effect and impact. We're really an organization that works a lot with citizens, with companies, these front runners, small and big. We also work with big energy companies that are honest about wanting to do this energy transition. But we also felt we needed to go to the streets. We needed a broad movement to put political pressure on the system, and demonstrating in the Netherlands is really out of fashion. I mean, the last demonstration was, I think, in 1982. That was really big. I don't think there was even a big demonstration against the Iraq war, which was sort of in Europe, the last big, So around, there was this People's Climate March that was organized in 2014, and we decided, this is actually what we need to be part of, this big global movement. We need to get to the streets. So 5 weeks before the date was there, we started to use sort of our social media outlets, etc., and we said, we need to show that we are also activists. In the Netherlands, the word activist is not really in fashion. But we started to use it as a badge of honor. We are activists. We act, because that's sort of, that's the definition of an activist. He who acts. There's nothing wrong with that. So we got, in a very short period, over 5,000 people right in the middle of Amsterdam. Then and at that time, this was new to the media, so they sort of forgot to report on it. But it But it started, this movement, already in social media, etc. And after that, and one of these, and this is and after this, I'll come to the climate, to our climate case, and hope to have a lively discussion with you. One of the change agents that we created with all these urgency and solution problems was the CEO of the public broadcasting network in the Netherlands. So this is a secret, you can't tell that to anyone else. But he came to us in the beginning of 2015 and say, and this, I don't know whether this is a good thing or a bad thing, but he was almost retiring and asking himself, what am I leaving behind? Being the CEO of this public broadcasting network. A similar thing happened to the chief editor of Guardian and a couple of other places. And he said, this climate change thing is really important, so how do we get it to the people? And we started talking with him in the beginning of 2015. So that was sort of in the background. That was, he started to become active. A couple of months before that, after this demonstration, he said, all right, what's the next big thing? So we started to discuss, well, there's this conference next year in Paris. It's kind of important. Probably it will create something of a wave. Let's use that wave, and that was also very important, to sort of, get this thing way up in the public attention. How do we do that? By making it physical, by showing with, the most valuable thing we have, your body, your being, how important this is. We're going to walk to Paris. And this is really, there isn't really nothing much behind it then, you know. It's just, our agenda is I say it's a small organization. We're about between 10 and 15 people. So then, you know, I have a couple of people saying, oh, we're just going to walk there. And we got a couple of interns, and they just started out to map out what's the route. It's very simple, you know, most of the work was actually map the route, find the hotels, and where did you drink coffee? That was a headache in north of France, actually. There are not a lot of coffee places in north of France. And but how do you make it interesting? So what we did is that we invited special guests, famous people, you know, people that people would know, people that had the solutions. But so this is a CEO of one of the big energy companies in the Netherlands. We got him to walk for a day. We had about, I think, 8 politicians to walk a bit of you know, small bits of the tour with us. They were sort of our special guests. This is a musical star. This is a comedian. I'm just saying, and you know, we didn't pay them anything to sort of walk with us. And why they walked with us? Because we had this sort of also positive reputation in the Netherlands of being the, you know, of being an organization that can deliver, and being an organization that get the message out there. And we have no marketing budget. There's no marketing budget. We just, you know, try and use sort of other channels that are available to us, social media, but also, you know, use the citizens that we work with and that have an interesting story, and sort of start talking about that, so that the media and you know, someone who writes an article thinks, hey, that's an interesting story, because they're never interested in the technicalities. I mean, this was a major frustration working on the climate case. I'm a lawyer. I think this was this is the biggest case of the century. And I get all these journalists asking me, because we had 900 co-plaintiffs, which was incredibly important in the beginning, to have 900 co-plaintiffs in this case. And they all wanted to know who were amongst our co-plaintiffs. Is there a nice housewife? Do they have kids? This is what they want to talk about. So we use that also in making our story bigger. So we had these people joining us, and what you see here. So this guy. So this is all media, and this is just us. This is Marianne, our director, writing down sort of her wish for the future. So we had milestones. We just had these wooden things that we knocked in the ground, and we said every day we have a milestone, and this well-known person will lay his milestone and sort of give his wish for the future. That's it. And so the national, so the public broadcasting network did a show on us every day for 5 minutes, and we had between 600,000 and 800,000 viewers a day, sort of reporting on what we were doing. And during what we were doing, the guests that we took with us were all people that we knew, the people that knew about the urgency, the people that had the solutions, and we sort of put them in the spotlight. So we had these people sort of talking on national television about all these fantastic new car sharing systems, etc., about, you know, how serious climate change really was. So this is this was the first day. The first day there were about 400 people walking with us, and there were different people every day. But it created a lot of buzz in the Netherlands. And this is when we arrived. This is I put this in after the last presentation, which was a bit shocking to me. This is a selfie to show, perhaps, you know, it's also possible the other way around. This is a selfie made by this man, who is the Director General of the Ministry of Environment. And way in the back is the Minister of Environment. And they joined us at our dinner. They came to us when we arrived in Paris to congratulate us on the whole trip, and actually to congratulate us with the outcome of the case. We beat them in court a couple of months before that. And they were actually quite happy that we beat them, because it gave them a stick to say to their voters, you know, this is actually happening and we need to do this. It completely, I'll come back to that. It completely changed the narrative in the Netherlands. So how long have I been talking?
I think 2 minutes only. The way no.
So I still have,
Yeah.
I still have half an hour?
We have about 40.
I don't know. No, I don't want to talk for half an hour. I want to know how much time there's still, you know.
We have about 40 minutes.
All right, excellent. Okay. So we won the Dutch climate case. And I want to, so one of the people that is employed in this small team is quite a brilliant, I think, movie maker. So this is a short introduction on the case.
In 2020 moet de uitstoot met zeker 25% zijn teruggebracht ten opzichte van 1990.
Het berusten in een geringe
Yeah, it was. I still get a bit emotional when I see this, because it was really quite something. But everybody told me they were crying in a courtroom, and I was outside talking to the press all the time. So really, it was. So I'll tell a bit about the case and why this is such a special case. At least that's what we think. That's what I'm thoroughly convinced of, and then a little bit about sort of the campaign around, the campaign surrounding it, and then let's have a chat. So the idea came from this guy, Roger Cox, that was the emotional lawyer. He wrote a book, Revolution Justified, sort of lining out that there was political gridlock, that corporations weren't also acting enough. So it was really the third power in a democracy and rule of law, the courts that needed to be activated, and how to do that. And there are two So this is a little bit on the content. So there are two important pillars behind this case. One is that the facts in the IPCC cannot be refuted in a court of law. And this is really important. They can in a parliament. You know, fact-free politics is a fact of everyday life, but fact-free judgments aren't. They're just not. This is what a judgment is based on. It's facts, a factual discussion. And courts is what, let me make this in a, and what a lot of people forget is that governments, it's not the International Panel on Climate Change, it's the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Governments are part of the process that's behind making this whole policy document. So we were convinced that the state would not refute any of the science, and they didn't. They didn't. And I'm convinced that in any court in the world where you bring the facts of climate change, from this report, no government will refute them. And I'll give you one example. There's now a case running in New Zealand. They saw our case and they thought this is important, we'll start. And New Zealand has quite a climate skeptic government. And we had a conference call 3 weeks ago with New Zealand lawyers. And they told us, you know, it was so amazing. The government didn't refute any of the facts. And I'm convinced that this is that this will be the case in any country. So that's the first most important pillar. The second is, this is not a case based on internationally binding obligations or on some specific thing in the Dutch constitution that protects the environment. This case is based on a part of the legal system that's sort of present in any country. That's tort law. So the most a simple way of explaining this, in most places, if or you know, and I realize that it's I come from the Netherlands, and you could say, well, you come from a very protected place. So I usually say most places. Maybe it's not everywhere, but really most places. You can go to if you have a house and you have a neighbor with a sick tree in his house, and the tree is tilting over, and it can collapse. And if it collapses on your bedroom, and you might die when you're asleep. You can go to a court and ask the judge, listen, there's this danger that's being created. I'm subjected to this danger. My neighbor has a legal obligation to either do something with that tree so it won't collapse, or get rid of the tree. I mean, one of the two. And that's the legal principle. That part of the law is what we used. That's the open norm of a duty of care. Your neighbor has a duty of care not to have his tree collapse on your bedroom. And we argue that the Dutch state has a duty of care to do its part in preventing dangerous climate change. And we said, well, and this duty of care, so there are no directly applicable legal norms internationally, but there are a lot of principles and legal norms out there internationally that you can use to interpret this legal duty of care, such as Article 2 of the UNFCCC, that says that the whole goal of the agreement is to prevent dangerous climate change. And what is dangerous climate change? Well, in Copenhagen, all countries, and then all the conferences after that, agreed that dangerous climate change was 2 degrees of global warming. So we argued, if they agree that 2 degrees of global warming is dangerous climate change and want to prevent dangerous climate change, it's a violation of their duty of care not to do the things that are necessary to get there. In short, I mean, we filed 500 pages of legal argumentation, so this is really a very short summary. And what are these other sort of legal principles that are in the UNFCCC? It's a principle of fairness. It's a principle that you can't say that you can postpone all these measures, what a lot of governments are still doing. No, we'll do it later. If you know that those measures are then going to be either impossible, because you have to do too much in too short of a time, or a lot more expensive. So future generations was also a part of mentioned in the judgment, the precautionary principle, sustainability principle. These were all principles the judge mentioned in his judgment, in his verdict, a panel of 3. which were relevant principles to in light of interpreting this duty of care. So what did the court find? Climate change is an enormous danger. If policy doesn't change, disasters will happen. It's, you know, everyone sort of active in the field knows this, but when a judge says this, it becomes all of a sudden, whoa, then that's relevant, because that's, if you know that the tree is going to fall down on your house, it becomes a legal question, not a political question. So that was what we argued. And also very important in the case that the state cannot hide behind the fact that it's only part of the solution, that only part of the problem. You know, if it's illegal for one guy to hit your car and create a dent, why wouldn't it be illegal if 10 guys do it at the same time? It's sort of illogical, right? If there would be one actor creating climate change, wouldn't he be liable? Of course. Well, now there are more, so they should be liable each for their part. That's what we argued, and that's what the court accepted. So I still have this. So what changed in the Netherlands? And this is also very important. It was not just a judgment. The court appealed, but it also accepted that it should already start implementing the measures to reduce its emissions to 25% below 1990 levels before 2020. But it also completely changed the political debate. Less than a year before the verdict, one of the two coalition parties, the biggest sort of party in the Netherlands, besides now, unfortunately, the Populist Party that's highest up in the polls, but the conservatives, the liberal conservatives, the fraction leader of the liberal conservatives in parliament refused to acknowledge that humans were causing climate change. He just, you know, other politicians pressing him, he refuses. I don't know, I'm not going to make a statement on that. It's now, 1 year later, that would be completely impossible. He would look ridiculous, really. I mean, the political debate in the Netherlands has fundamentally changed after this case. A majority of parliament is now for phasing out all coal-fired power plants as soon as possible. Now you should know that the Netherlands is the only country that in 2014 and 2015 in Europe opened 3 brand new coal-fired power plants. We are, by and large, we are totally dependent on coal-fired power at the moment. There are experts that say we could actually do without them because we have so many gas-fired power plants that we could actually shut down all coal-fired power plants today. We still have all this gas. But that's a major shift. Anyone that would have proposed that before the judgment would, they would say, you're barking mad. And now the majority of parliament is saying we need to phase out coal-fired power as soon as possible. There's a proposal for a new climate act. And a lot of people say, well, is it right that a judge determines how much emissions we should reduce? No, the judge is just there, and he made very clear also in his statement, this is the minimum of the minimum. This is really as low as it gets. But it's for politics to decide the right level. And what's happening after the case? Political parties picking up that, what the judge said, and they're proposing a climate change with targets that are much higher than the court ordered the Dutch states to perform. It's not law yet, but at least there's a debate on this. And this is what I'm working on a lot right now myself. I think that this type of case is going to have a great importance in sort of the era after Paris. When we were still in court, our government said, and all the governments have been saying this for 25 years, we need an international agreement. It's a global problem. And if we act and others don't, then it's useless. So we first need to divvy up this pie. Who does what? So we've been discussing how to divvy up the pie for 25 years. Now there's Paris. And what did we decided? Nah, we're not going to bother with that anymore. Divvy up the pie, it's too burdensome, it's too difficult. We'll let countries decide what they do themselves. That's the core of Paris. National contributions that you decide upon yourself. and then trying to ratchet it up. But there's no compliance system. So if one country, such as Canada, such as Australia, such as Japan, rich countries, say, nah, we don't care, we can't do anything. But what we can do is say, well, actually, you have a legal obligation to protect your own citizens on the basis of your own law. And we think that our case really gained a lot more strength after Paris than it already had before. We had to go to the Cancun Agreement, which was non-binding, to fight this 2-degree target. Now it's in a treaty, well below 2 degrees, going towards 1.5. The amazing thing about this is there are not a lot of reports out there that show us how to get there. They've all been sort of aiming at 2 and say, woof, that's difficult. So that it's going to be even more difficult, which reinforces our case that politics need to act a lot faster than they're doing right now. And it's unlawful not to do that because it creates potential catastrophe. So that's the case. So that's what we're trying to do right now. And that most of my attention is going to. So this is an overview of what's already happening, which is a lot more than the people realize. So there are currently cases before the courts in the Netherlands, Belgium. There was a Pakistani judgment. There are a lot of cases in the United States, and there's a case in New Zealand already before the court claiming that the state is not doing enough on climate change. There are cases underway in Norway and France, and we're especially talking to a lot of teams to do the legal research to get this case running in their country. And we're trying to do that under this new banner of the Climate Litigation Network, which you'll, if you say, I've never seen this logo, that's right, it was never shown in public. So this is a very, this is a very new thing. So very short. So how did we go about it? We got James Hansen, a very, to those of who are in climate change, this is he had a great man, exactly as the person here said. We wrote a letter to Parliament, and we said to Parliament, you're not doing enough, this is what you should be doing. And the government replied to us, and they actually agreed, because they have to agree sort of on the science when it comes to official documents. And they said, yeah, we agree, but we're not going to do it because others aren't acting as well. That was basically what they sort of lined out. And we started a process of crowd pleading. So anyone that had any thoughts that they thought would be useful for this case, they could submit them to us, and they could become co-plaintiffs. So it wasn't only the legal research that we were doing it. We were involving this undercurrent, this bottom-up movement, and make that part of that case. And that's been very important for us for sort of creating all the buzz around it. So we filed the summons in 2013. We had a hearing at the court. So these are all our supporters. And what also really created this atmosphere in the court, we called the court and said, listen, we have more than 800 co-plaintiffs. They want to be in court. How are we going to facilitate that? So they said, well, we can only have 2 rooms and then sort of video it to the second room. So yeah, but that's not enough. And then, well, all right, we'll allow you to arrange another room somewhere else. It was the Court of The Hague. It was actually not. It was actually not the Supreme Court, but the summons was filed at the Supreme Court. This is a formal thing. So this was a district court. We're in appeal procedure right now, so we're going to go to appeal, and we'll probably end up at the Supreme Court. But we actually had it on YouTube, the whole hearing, which was unheard of. But we had so many people. This was the only way the court could sort of cater to the fact that these people had an interest in this case. And again, we sort of used the people that are part of our network to show that this was not something of the small NGO, but this was something of the people. This was people's interest. So here you have an adventurer, a DJ, a weatherman, and a happy mom that we sort of used. And this is all very low cost that we made this, and we put them on Twitter and on our Facebook website, and the people that followed us just kept sharing these things, and it became sort of a known thing that there's this group with all these people behind it that are suing the government. We also made this video maker that I mentioned earlier. went on the day of the hearing to Parliament. This is really a great guy. This is Justin, and Justin just went there with a microphone to Parliament and said to this politician, "So I hear there's this thing with climate change. What's up?" And you have, it's in parts it's hilarious because you have all these people trying to explain to this. I think he's 8 or 9. I'm not entirely sure, but he's quite young, 9-year-old. That they're really doing a horrible job at protecting his future. It was fantastic. So here is this is sort of the graph that he took with him, which is the statistics of renewable energy in the Netherlands, and the orange bar at the bottom is the Netherlands. So that's it. This was sort of our case of hope, and this is what we all often get. This is not possible. But you know what? The people that can imagine the impossible are the ones that actually make the change. All right, thanks a lot. All right, okay. I'm told that I could lead the discussion, so I guess Okay, excellent.
Thanks, Alan Webb from the World Future Council. 2 questions. One, can you put up the website again for the Climate Litigation Network? Because I googled it and it doesn't.
There's no website.
It's not there yet. Okay.
No.
And
You can send me an email.
And secondly, it's fantastic, sort of taking national litigation measures, which is really good. But isn't there also a need for international litigation measures? Because you'll have, in some countries, you won't have success but a requirement to move. You'll have other countries that have already done a lot but are victims also, and their peoples. And in fact, it is a global commons issue and a future generations issue, not just a state-by-state issue. Marshall Islands and Palau have sort of talked about the idea of taking a case to the International Court of Justice on climate change. And at the moment, Marshall Islands is in court on another issue, but also a positive obligation, like action which was required for an issue of threat to human survival. That's the nuclear weapons case. The hearings are happening this week and next week. What do you think about the possibility of also adding international litigation in order to ensure implementation of that positive obligation of actions to get down to below 2 degrees?
So this is it's a very important route, but people have been working on that for quite a while. The problem with the International Court of Justice is that its jurisdiction is quite limited, and basically, you only have a case if a country agrees to be subjected to that case often. Right, advisory. So you're right. And the advisory opinion. I'm aware of a initiative, and there are quite a number of people involved, to get an advisory opinion before the International Court of Justice on the international law obligations of states, and that was before the Paris Agreement, and the goal of that was to get sort of recognition by the International Court of Justice of the 2-degree limit, which is now well below 2 degrees. It's quite an operation because it's not that easy to get an advisory opinion. So you really need a tremendous amount of lobbying, and I'm so impressed when I see what is happening there. So it's important, but it's going quite. The pace is not. It's not an extremely high pace, and it's not something that I think will do the job by itself. So I think these efforts need to. Still, there's still a lot of value in investing in that, but sort of the power of national courts in their respect, in the area where they have jurisdiction, is way above of what the International Court of Justice has, sort of on a global scale, and that's why we, so that this strategy basically to go to domestic court also came out of the lack of progress, or the lack of speed in the progress of an internet the route of the International Court of Justice.
Just a quick follow-up question.
Yeah.
Why is it taking so long? Because when we did the advisory opinion on nuclear weapons, all we have to do is get a majority vote in the UN General Assembly.
Yeah, there you are. Yeah, so there you are. So So that's it. To get a majority in the General Assembly, to get a court to tell them that what we're doing is illegal. Yeah, because the outcome is so predictable, and although there are a lot of countries that don't have nuclear, there are not a lot of countries that don't have coal. So we're all in. That's the whole problem of climate change. So the majority is not there. So all the lobbying is going in that direction. Yeah.
Well, you're a superb speaker and a bad moderator.
Yes.
Well, first, of course, mega congratulations for what you did. It's absolutely fantastic. I'd like to come in on your division of 1/3 urgency and 2/3 solutions. I fear this picture is not complete. At the Club of Rome, I'm co-president of the Club of Rome and Zweitsecker. We are currently doing a new report in which 1/3 is urgency and 1/3 is solutions. But then there is a central piece which we call a philosophical crisis, which has to be addressed as well. If you look into what is happening in Poland these days, or in Hungary, or in Trump's speeches, or in South Africa, or in Indonesia, or in Honduras, or wherever you care to look, you see a deep philosophical crisis not allowing people to do what you can do in the Netherlands. So we also have to address this question: what exactly is wrong? And the Pope has been very, very helpful in enlightening us. But at the end of the day, we say we need a new enlightenment. The enlightenment of the 18th century has been transmogrified and diminished into hailing selfishness. I mean, as Rainer Rieshammer yesterday said, me, me, me. This is the wrong kind of philosophy. And therefore, I suggest add the third.
Yeah, I actually have very little to add to that, because you're completely right. The thing is, this sort of what you mentioned, philosophy. And this is my opinion. I think that especially in the sort of the TTIP debate, it's completely what's going wrong in that debate is that that this sort of philosophical part of that is not a part of that debate. And I actually find, I have to say, the discussion around TTIP to be rather poor and narrow sometimes. It should be a much wider, broader debate, and especially for that reason. The only thing is, we don't have, and that's our problem. We're in the game of speed as a foundation. We want this renewable energy transition to go as fast as possible, and the thing with philosophical debates is that they tend to take a long time. So we.
When we introduced the feed-in tariffs law,
right,
which pushed Germany ahead of even the Netherlands.
No, not even. I mean, far ahead. Far ahead. They were a great example. We actually used Germany in our case as an example.
May I ask you?
Wait a second. Whoa. We've got, because we have the mic here and then over here.
No problem. You go ahead. Thank you. Yeah, congratulations as well. It's really an impressive story. What I would like to know and get your opinion on is, this is about a legal strategy. You're a lawyer. But you briefly touched on an economic strategy, which is the divestment campaign. I guess that you have drawn on the evidence compiled by the group carbon tracker in London, who've done remarkable work. And I mean, the Paris conference was a success story for the divestment movement so far. So their target group is not governments. Their target group is the financial sector. Although we have an overlap, look at Norway's, the world's largest sovereign wealth fund, which has put on a decision. We will see how far it holds to divest from fossil fuels. So do you see synergies or how do you respond with your legal strategy to economic strategies put forward by organizations like the Carbon Tracker to make it more efficient? As I think legal is fine, it's great, but you need the economic impact. You need to bring the evidence across that it is largely about economics as well, that a carbon protection strategy globally might work.
So, I mean, but that's really a minor point. The economic, a lot of the economic arguments are part of our case in sort of showing that it's possible. A reasonableness test is sort of a legal test. Like, is it reasonable to ask this change? Yes, it is. Look at all the economics. But that's really a side issue. I think the most important thing is that we need everyone that we can get to push for this. So that's corporate finance. That's the teacher of your kid. That's and that's what we mean also with a wide sort of a wide movement. That's why we involve as an organization the CEO of an energy company in this walk to Paris. And to walk to Paris is really seen, at first as a very, activist, left, whatever thing to do. And there's the CEO of an energy company walking with us. So we try to join the two. And what I also think is the synergy between the two is what this gentleman pointed out as sort of, a need for philosophy. I mean, what we are trying to do also in our case and all the other things that we're doing and talking about the urgency and what now people in the finance business are doing, the governor of the Bank of England and now also the CEO of the bank in the Netherlands. So we have, just 2 weeks ago, we had the CEO of the National Bank in the Netherlands saying that Parliament is not doing enough to speed up this energy transition because it will create economic havoc. He's not a politician at all. So, and what I mean with that is that it's not okay not to act. That's the simple. So it's not okay. It's immoral. As you mentioned, the Pope did a fantastic job in sort of making this moral argument, but you see that moral argument can come from it's also economically immoral, it's legally immoral, it's philosophically, so that's sort of, so I think that's, you need every strategy you can get your hands on, but the synergy in that is also that we need to act. It's not okay not to act, basically.
I just want to point out and make the link to the session before on the suppression and pushback against NGO and civil society, because you talked about divestment and Bill McKibben. I interviewed Bill McKibben the other night. He's in jail right now. Daily, he has to spend a certain amount of hours in jail in the state of New York because he protested fracking. So, freedom.
The basic question is, do you foresee a time soon in the future when you can bring the single most important finding of IPCC to court? It's a number, it's about 860 gigatons of carbon. It's the amount of carbon that we can add to the atmosphere with a 66 percentile chance. And all of the climate scientists are really united that that is the single most important finding. Because if we want 2 degrees, we have to limit our emissions to 860 gigatons. Now the point is, it would seem highly logical, legally, to bring this number because you can't have 2 degrees C without that number. And of course, we don't have sovereign atmospheres. You can't just have the Dutch atmosphere separated from everything else. So that's the question. Can you bring the most important number from science to court, or is there some impossibility to mount a legal challenge based on the amount of emissions that will actually deliver 2C?
So the only way to bring that to court is that if you can make that a national number. So the 800, I think it's like in my. So I thought it was lower, but it doesn't matter. So whatever it is. Yeah, right. All right. So yeah, great. Yeah, of course. So if you can make that a national number. Now the number. Yeah, I think you can, but this is a really difficult. This is one of the hardest nuts to crack. So where did we get this 25%? The IPCC in 2007 said that Annex 1 countries needed to reduce 25 to 40% emissions compared to 1990 before 2020. That was in the IPCC 2007 report. And that really became the basis of a lot of European policy of a lot of countries. That was acknowledged in Copenhagen. It's in an annex of the decision in Cancun. So the Annex 1 countries, and this was really key in our case, Annex 1 countries in a decision drafted, we recognize that 25 to 40% emission reduction before 2020 is necessary to stay under 2 degrees, and that staying under 2 degrees is mighty important. It's there, it's on the website of the UNFCCC. So we use that. We say, well, if you recognize this importance of that number in an official forum of this importance, then that must be the legal standard. So that's where we came up with the 25 to 40%. So that, yeah, exactly. So there's no such number in AR5. So legally, there's no such number in AR5. There's no emission reduction standard for a specific group of countries in AR5. And why? Well, that's sort of political, but probably it's because of all the, the Kyoto firewall and all the diplomacy from countries such as the US to get rid of that Kyoto firewall. So there's nothing really in there. So it's more difficult, but it's not impossible. I mean, what that 25 to 40%, this is a bit technical, but so it's possible, but it's difficult. But I think it can be done. That's the short answer.
We'll take some more questions, but let's not get into a discussion on climate, because this session is supposed to be on outreach, on advocacy, and how you'd make change, and not to get into the technical aspects of climate change. So because we don't have that much time left.
Yes, I won't get into technicalities. My name is Heinz Stockinger. I come from Austria, from the platform against nuclear risks. So just one question about a detail, but which fits into the PR efforts, public relations. Why does it have to be James Hansen? He's a renowned climatologist, but he's very much pro-nuclear, which maybe isn't so bad in itself. But he's in favor of fast breeders in the future, for example, plutonium reactors, extension of the plutonium economy. So this brings just one aspect, is proliferation, more proliferation risk. So there would be other persons for PR, I think.
Yeah, noted.
My big congratulations also, because it's a big step you done. And only I want to follow a second the words of Mr. von Weizsäcker, remembering here Mr. Maurice Strong, that said that really to be effective, the accords, the global accords between countries, are only if the people, the persons, include themselves, their values, spiritual values, moral and ethic values. It's the only way to have the real accords between countries. I want to honor here Mr. Maurice Strong, and because I think is the real question to have all of us to have the success. Thank you.
Thanks, Virginia. Paul Walker from Washington, D.C. Nice presentation, very thoughtful, so thank you very much for that. I had one quick comment, and as I was trying to get to sleep on American time last night, I turned on CNN, and they had one of the latest Republican presidential debate, and which was of course with Donald Trump and Marco Rubio and Cruz and Kasich. But what's relevant is Rubio was asked a question on climate change, and this was a Florida debate, and he's a Florida senator, as a lot of you know, I'm sure. And he said, well, of course, climate changes all the time, and there's no way we can pass any legislation or make any legal ruling that will impact climate. And in fact, there's no specific climate unique issue going on at this point. So even in the presidential campaign, we still suffer deniers of climate change, at least on the Republican side, certainly not on the Democratic side today. So in the United States anyway, it still remains an enormous challenge with a lot of people. He got a standing ovation for that comment in the audience. My question is on the Dutch plan for renewable energy. What do you think are the best alternatives for the Netherlands at this point? Is it wind and solar, and if so, what mix? And secondly, I had not heard actually that the Netherlands was building coal-fired power plants, and this seems so retrogressive. And I'm wondering why is that the case? Is it is it the Dutch politics? I'm sure that's part of it. Is it cheap, the cheapest alternative at this point in time, which could very well be the case? Is it lobbying from Poland? Because Poland, is going that route as well. Very troubling, but they declare they'll have the very best, coal-fired power plant, the biggest, very best coal-fired power plant in the world. And we're all against that too. So that's my really question specifically on the Dutch plan.
So on the technicalities of what's the alternative for the Netherlands, that's what our report was about. That was the goal of the report that I just showed. And in short, it has a lot of wind, a lot of solar also. If you make your whole, the question of energy, I think that the built environment is a really important factor in that. It's 1/3 of our emissions is the built environment, and we can make that energy neutral. So that's already 1/3 of your, and you don't need to be, and you'll need a couple of windmills for high buildings like this. Obviously, can't all get their energy from their own roof. But still, that's we're currently building a lot of wind in the sea, etc. The problem, as I perceive in the Netherlands for wind, is that the government policy is really wrong. They get big corporations to plant the windmills right sort of in front of the porch of people, that the only thing that they get from that wind energy is a distorted view. Whereas if they would actually get the benefits of that windmill, and those benefits would go to the school and the elderly care, etc., everybody would be in favor. And that's been shown in a number of countries a number of times. And in the Netherlands, we're really getting that policy wrong. But if we get it right, that's actually also a major source. Why we're fossil? Yeah, we have Shell. We have the biggest petrochemical industry in Europe. We have the biggest port in Europe. We have the biggest gas reserve or used to have in Europe. So we're fossil. That's the short answer. And that lobby is really powerful. So the idea of these coal-fired power plants was to be an exporter of energy, cheap energy, to the rest of Europe. Coal getting into our ports, they're right there. One of the coal-fired power plants was built in the port. They're actually both on the port, so right at the sea. And CCS. So the drillers, the Shells of this world, they see a way out in carbon capture. So these, the story is that these were state-of-the-art coal-fired power plants, and that we would make loads of money by developing the technology to capture the carbon and put it under the ground. None of that happened. I mean, there's not 1 kilogram of carbon being captured right now, just going all up in the air. But that was the lobby around this. Yeah.
We have one more question before we break for lunch.
Okay, I want to congratulate you again. I come from Argentina, so my question is about how do you see the situation for our countries that I personally come from this process of the last 10 years or something of Latin American and South American politicians are not sort of prioritizing environment. So I know that our country wasn't very good at the negotiations in Paris. So, and what do you think about how could be this approach at the national level? Because I think that it should work, and it's been working in a lot of situations to do this, to do it in the domestic court. Yeah? I think that could work, and Argentina is very good in mass mobilization, unlike Netherlands. So, but I think that there's a cultural difference to take into account. So, if you can answer some of this.
Whether a court system is able to come to a decision like this, that's a very specific question, and I have no. So I wouldn't be able to sort of answer that, but and it varies amongst countries. This case would never have worked in Poland or Hungary, but it did work in Pakistan. So because there is a judgment in Pakistan by a very courageous judge from the Lahore court there. So it's really not a matter of economic development. But what's the trust and what's the status of a court? It's important that this is respected. Often we get the question, what if the government doesn't reduce its emissions? And our answer is, well, in the Netherlands, the government always follows what the court does. If the court says this is illegal, the government acts. So this is not really a question that we're not looking into legal tools to force the government. What if? No, I mean, this is, and that's of course important to our case. That wouldn't have been possible if in this case, wouldn't have been possible within a country where you just have political appointees that are puppets of the government, obviously. So that's it's very specific, and.
The politicians respect the court.
Well, that's a start.
That's not a problem, but perhaps the mass perception about climate change is very different.
But I mean, there was a Pew poll in 2009, so that's not yesterday, but still, it's fairly recent. And it showed the Netherlands was more climate skeptic than the US.
Wow. That's an achievement.
So.
Okay. If you follow American politics, U.S. politics, you'll know that there's an empty seat on the Supreme Court right now, and you'll understand why there's such a fight between the Republicans and the Democrats on whether that seat should be filled before the next election, because it's exactly that, the power of the court.
If I can make a very short comment on that. The U.S. Supreme Court acknowledged climate change in Massachusetts versus EPA in 2008. There are loads of, and that's a really important judgment. Without that judgment, Obama wouldn't have been able to take one measure against carbon emissions. I mean, that's hugely important. But that was a majority on the Supreme Court that said that at that time. And actually, in the judgment of the Supreme Court, it said that climate change is potentially catastrophic. The word catastrophic is in that judgment. There's lots and lots of climate litigation going on in the US. And not in every case there's a win, but never has a judge said that climate change is a non-issue and that's not there. So I think it actually, I mean, that should be much more in these political debates. It should be much more in the debate that, well, whenever you go to court, you don't it's not refuted. The judges all come to the same conclusion. So what's up? How does this work? Sorry.
Dennis, we're going to stop I know we could go on. We're going to stop for lunch now. It's been a long morning, and I don't want to take time away from your lunchtime. But this has been extremely enlightening and inspiring. And for me, the message that I'm taking away is you don't have to be a big, it's what you brought up this morning about these big organizations. You don't have to be Greenpeace. You don't have to be WWF. You have to have, if you have good ideas, if you're creative, and if you're courageous, you can get things done going new ways, thinking and acting out of the box. And Agenda has really done a spectacular job with a small group. You say you don't even have a marketing budget, but things can be done. So congratulations on that. And thanks so much for sharing that with us today. And I hope that, and I'm sure that you all are also taking this with you and new motivations for your work. So thanks and have a nice lunch.